Today, we're delighted to welcome Djojohadikusumo, Deputy Chairman of the Regular Party's Governing Board. Hashim is the youngest son of the late Dr. Djojohadikusumo, considered the leading architect of Indonesia's modern economy, known to many of us who have followed Indonesia for a number of years. Hashim is also a well-known Indonesian entrepreneur and a successful businessman. Formerly an investment banker, he owns 2 agribusinesses and is chairman and president of the nation's petroleum, and that's only the ones that were mentioned in Google. So, he graduated from Pomona College in Claremont, California with a degree in political science. He's something of a Renaissance man, and just knowing some of it, he is a Renaissance man. His interests include preservation and conservation, rainforests, wildlife sanctuaries. He can talk to you about rhinos, orangutans, tigers, as well as the Indonesian economy and political scene as equally. He also chairs the Djojohadikusumo Foundation, which promotes social activities in education, children's health and well-being, and cultural heritage preservation in such areas as Japanese and Indonesian linguistics and anthropology. Hashim is the brother of Lieutenant General retired Prabowo Subianto, leader of the Regular Party. He co-founded the party with his brother in 2008. The Regular stands for Gerakan Indonesia Raya, or Great Indonesia Movement. It is one of the 2 new parties to pass the threshold test in the 2009 elections, enabling them to be seated in Parliament. And I think they'll tell us a little bit about how the electoral system works and the legislative system in his talk. If not, we can bring it out in the questions and answers. General Prabowo is a potential candidate for president of Indonesia in 2014, as I guess most of us realize. Various Indonesian polls consistently rank him as one of the leading potential candidates. Hashim will speak today on the Guerrilla Party's views, his assessment of the prospects of the Guerrilla Party and of General Prabowo in the 2014 legislative and presidential elections, and his perspective on the overall 2014 political landscape. His talk will be followed by a Q&A session. Please join me in welcoming Hashim.
David and Aaron, thank you for your kind hospitality and this great setting. Also mention Mrs. Masters, Ali Masters, for being with us here today. And our kind regards and affection and love to Ed, who I understand is recovering from a medical condition. Ambassador Roy, for gracing this talk. Thank you very much. Ambassador Paul Cleveland, wherever you are. Oh, you were here, yeah, right. So we have many ambassadors here today, so I feel a bit honored. I wear many hats, as David mentioned. Today I'm a politician. I never thought in my younger days that I would ever be a politician. I'm a businessman, proud to be a businessman. I'm a capitalist, and proud to be a capitalist. One of my other hats is I just became appointed chairman of the Jakarta Zoo. My good friend, the new Jakarta government, Jokowi, was kind enough to appoint me Jakarta, chairman of Jakarta Zoo, because he and I both have shared the same interest, the same love for wildlife conservation. And this is something that I put into the platform of Guerrilla. The Guerrilla Party is the only party in Asia which seeks to actively promote and preserve wildlife conservation. So tomorrow I'm meeting Dennis Kelly, the head of the Smithsonian Zoo, wearing my other hat as chairman of the Jakarta Zoo. ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all of you for making me feel at home. It's the weather is almost like Jakarta. I think it's worse than Jakarta. And as my wife, Ani, who's here with me today, Ani, can you say, can you? Ani loves the cold and the snow. And she loved living in Europe with me for 12 years. She came back in 2010 and she started complaining about the weather. And of course, everybody complains about Jakarta traffic. Okay, so in a way we feel rather a pleasant difference from being in Jakarta. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked to keep all my remarks to 30 minutes. It's going to be an effort, David, because 2 days ago on Monday, my brother Prabowo and the leadership of our party declared our manifesto, the new manifesto, and our program, which we call the 6-point program. They took 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours, not including, part of it was an hour and a half Q&A session with Prabowo. So you've asked me, and I will try my best. I will try my best, and if I miss anything, and it's inevitable because of time constraints, I will be missing something. Of our program, we have a very interesting program which I actually spent 9 months with our team to draft. It took 9 months of effort to draft this program. This program is an offshoot and derivative of the program that we actually drafted in 2008, and which we Ambassador Pacquiao, sama datang Bu, Ibu Rosa.
Sorry, Billy.
It is a month of Ramadan, so we thank Ambassador and his gracious wife for being with us. Now, I understand I'm the fourth politician to address you, or address USINDO. I'm the fourth politician. The first one was my friend, Abu Rizal Bakri, who I think addressed you a year and a half ago. He's the leader of the Golkar party. The second person was His Excellency Hatta Rajasa, the leader of the National Mandate Party, or PAN, as you say in Indonesia, Partai Amanat Nasional. The third politician I understand has addressed you a month ago, Gita Wiryawan, from the governing Democratic Party. I'm the fourth politician. But there's a difference. The first three politicians are members of the government. They're members, each of them are members of parties which are of the members, constituent parts of the governing coalition. Gerindra is the opposition party. I'm an opposition politician, and there's a reason why we're in the opposition. And I hope in the next 29 minutes to be able to explain why. 8 minutes. We agree that David will wing at me as time goes on, and that's a 5-minute towards the end. And I'm sure during the Q&A that will last about 30 minutes, we'll be able to address some of the other questions. Now, Gerindra, what do we stand for? Why did we set up this party? We set the party, we founded the party on the 6th of February 2008. Gerindra is 5.5 years old. We are the second smallest party with 26 members in Parliament, but we were fortunate to get into Parliament. There were 38 political parties competing in the last election in 2000. Ambassador Cleveland, there were 38 parties which competed in the 2009 election. Because of the changes in the election law, we have 12. We have now 12 parties. So a reduction of 26 parties from the 38 to 26. The threshold for getting into the parliament is raised from 2.5% to 3.5% of the vote. And that will be another hurdle for many parties. Now, Gerindra, what do we stand for? Why did we set up this party? Well, basically 2 reasons. The founding fathers of the party, of which I found myself a member, had 2 things in mind. One is to protect and preserve the pluralistic, multicultural, and multi-religious character of the Indonesian state. So basically, we want to preserve and protect Pancasila, the state ideology of Indonesia since 1945, which ensures the equal treatment of all Indonesians under the law. This is a very important point because Indonesia, founded in 1945, proclaimed its independence on the 17th of August 1945, was an association, a voluntary association of tribes, cultural entities, and religious groups. We were a voluntary association of tribes, ethnic groups, religious groups, all united by what was basically a social contract. And the social contract was necessary as a voluntary act because in 1945, Indonesia had no army. Unlike the United States in 1776, when you had a continental army, Indonesia had no army then. The army was set up on the 5th of October 1945, 6 weeks after the proclamation. So Christian groups, Hindu groups, Buddhist groups, all the minority tribes, or suku, as we say, suku bangsa, voluntarily joined the Republic of Indonesia because of the promise of equal treatment under the law provided by the state ideology, Pancasila. This is a very important point because we at Gerindra, Prabowo, myself, and others felt that the underlying underpinnings of Indonesia was and is and will be threatened in the future by extremist forces preying and misusing and abusing all the centrifugal forces of a multi-ethnic state such as ours. Indonesia, as you all know, I don't want to dwell on this again, but we have, I think the last count I saw, we have at least 500 languages, 500 or more tribes, we have 6 major religions, all united on 17,000 islands. The last count I saw 17,000, 6 major islands. Difficult to keep united. And when you have examples like the Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, Sudan, I say Canada, I say Bangladesh, I say Sri Lanka, when you have all these centrifugal forces resulting in the dissolution of great states, we believe that preserving Pancasila as a state ideology is of utmost importance. So that's the first part of Gerindra's raison d'être. That is why we set up to preserve and protect for generations to come a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious state under the law. A Christian, a Buddhist, a Hindu would feel the same way that a Muslim would feel, that this was their fatherland, this was their motherland, Tanah Airku. Hence the importance of Pancasila and the survival of Pancasila to underpin the social contract that we have. The Christians, the Hindus, the Buddhists all joined Indonesia voluntarily because they were promised that under Pancasila. The second pillar of Gerindra is to promote and implement policies to uplift Indonesia's poor. And what we call in Indonesian ekonomi kerakyatan, loosely translated as the people's economy, but basically essentially focusing on policies to uplift Indonesia's poor. That's the basic way I can translate it. Maybe other Indonesians can translate it in a different way. It's basically to realize the full potential of Indonesia, given its abundant natural resources and its geographic position in the tropics, including but especially abundant rainfall, and I will go on this later. The main focus of the second pillar of Gerindra is the preservation of Article 33 of the Indonesian Constitution of 1945, which, and and I will quote in English, that the land, the waters, and the natural resources within the Republic of Indonesia shall be under the powers of the state and shall be used to the greatest benefit of all the people. So this underlines the second pillar of religious philosophy. So what are the problems Indonesia faces? Again, I'll have to say this in 25 minutes, or 22 minutes, David. I identified, and ladies and gentlemen, I think our flyer has been distributed to all of you in English. It's English translation of the detailed, very detailed 3-page program that was announced by Prabowo and our other colleagues on Monday evening, just 2 days ago. Very detailed, but basically, I've identified the following salient points. There are many problems we face, but these are the 6 major ones that we have identified. One is the threat posed by fundamentalist radical groups attempting to change the character of our state. Urindra is very concerned about the rising intolerance that we see in Indonesia today. 400 churches have been closed or burned down in the last 10 years. Hindu temples, Buddhist temples, Ahmadiyya, the mosques have been attacked. And just 2 weeks ago, the Shiite village of Sampang in Madura, the villages were forced to relocate, involuntarily or involuntarily forced to relocate to another area. These are native Maduris of the island of Madura. These are not settlers, these are not settlers from other islands. These are native Maduris whose only crime was to be members of the Shiite sect of Islam. Now in Indonesia, the Shiites number less than 0.5% of the population. The Shiites are a mainstream Orthodox Islamic group, numbering I think 35% of all Muslims are Shiites, but in Indonesia only 0.5%. But, and this is, and this is not an attack on the government, but the current sitting Minister of Religious Affairs stated a year ago that he thought that the Shiites were a heretical part of Islam. He considered Shiaism heresy. I understand that the Iranian ambassador got furious, he was quite furious. So was the Iraqi ambassador, and so was the Syrian ambassador. They all three were angry because our Minister of Religious Affairs called the Shiite branch of Islam heresy. But gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, this is just symptomatic of the problems that we face in Indonesia. When a mainstream part of Islam is considered by the sitting Minister of Religious Affairs to be heresy, then you can imagine how the other minority religions feel. I'm a Christian, I'm a part of the Protestant denomination. My sister is Roman Catholic. Haji Prabowo is a Muslim, that's our family. We've always been a multi-religious family. We have no problems with that, and many other Indonesians are the same way. You can imagine how religious minorities in Indonesia feel when the Shiites are branded as a heretical part of Islam. And of course then the Ahmadiyya, it's debatable whether they're Muslim or not, it's not for me to say, but with their welfare and their position in Indonesian society has been physically threatened, physically attacked on numerous occasions. And unfortunately, the law enforcement authorities of Indonesia do very little to protect them. There are gruesome scenes on YouTube, which all of you can take a look at, and this is one example of the anxiety, alarm felt by minorities in Indonesia today. So that's rising intolerance. I can speak for hours on that, but because of time limitations. Now the second problem we face is widespread debilitating poverty and increasing social economic disparity. Now here, ladies and gentlemen, and this is no disrespect to our embassy and to our colleagues, who do a fantastic job here representing Indonesia, but the fact of the matter is that when we look at official statistics in Indonesia, which say that only 12% of Indonesians live below the poverty line, so then I ask, where is the other, 55% that the World Bank says is poor? According to the World Bank, between 50 and 55% of Indonesians below the poverty line. According to the Indonesian government statistics, BPS, Bureau Pusat Statistik, only 12% of Indonesians are poor, below the poverty line. So the question is, where is the other 38 to 43%? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the fact is that there is another category in the Indonesian statistics that are near poor. There is 38 to 43% of the Indonesian population are considered near poor, hampir miskin. According to the World Bank, they're poor. The difference is the Indonesian government has put a threshold of 70 cents a day or 7,000 rupiahs as the threshold for poverty. The World Bank uses a $2 a day or 30,000. So you can imagine that, in fact, in my opinion, in the opinion of Gerindra and many other colleagues, the fact is that 50 to 55% of the Indonesian people are poor and live in appalling conditions which affect their daily lives. So 120 million people are actually poor, not the 30 million that we see in official government statistics. We have, as a third problem, depleting energy resources. Depleting energy resources. Our oil will disappear in 12 years. Our natural gas will disappear between 30 and 35 years. And our coal will disappear in about 70 years based on current usage. Now, the problem is, what does Indonesia do when oil runs out, our gas runs out, and our coal runs out? What do we do? That is a major problem, ladies and gentlemen. The fourth area of concern to Gerindra is the population explosion. One of the results of the fall of the Suharto regime was basically the dismantling of the family planning program. The family planning program was considered one of the successes of the Suharto regime. Essentially, the family planning program was dissolved in essence, but not in name. What we see now is an explosion of the population. We estimate between 1.6% to 2% of the population growth per annum. We have to find the means to feed 5 million new mouths every year. 5 million. We estimate the population of Indonesia, if the population growth is unchecked, to go to about 330 million people from the current 245 million. And then, of course, the problem of corruption and weak governance. Most Indonesian observers or foreign observers of Indonesia read in the papers, there's not a day that goes by that we don't have a corruption case mentioned, and often 2, 3, 4, 5 cases a day. This is a major problem. As of last week, I think 175 to 180 bupatis, or county chiefs, regions, have been indicted or imprisoned. I think up to about 70 to 18 governors have been indicted or imprisoned. Corruption is endemic, it's a cancer on our society, and it's a major cause of great concern because basically a misallocation of resources. And the last point that I have for today is the widespread environmental degradation and deforestation of our country. And as of last count, we have seen a figure of 58 million hectares, or 150 million acres of rainforest are either gone, depleted, or severely degraded. 58 million hectares, or 150 million acres. Now, what are the priorities for Greenland? There are many priorities, but we've identified 9, which I'd like to mention this to you today. One is infrastructure. Greenland will pour massive resources to infrastructure. Everybody who's been to Jakarta lately has seen the traffic problems of Jakarta. Is one of various cities. There are Bandung, and anybody who goes to Bandung on weekends can see the traffic problems. You go to Surabaya, people now complain about Jogja, Semarang. Almost every major city of Indonesia has severe traffic problems. Anybody who's been to Jakarta lately has seen all the frequent brownouts or blackouts. Severe power shortage. A severe problem with ports, airports, seaports, a problem with mass transit, and the list goes on and on and on. We will concentrate heavily on infrastructure, including all those to do with transport, but especially on electric power. We have great resources. Indonesia has their greatest resources in terms of geothermal resources, which to the credit of this current government is being affected and implemented today. The second area of concern and will be a priority for Gerindra is agriculture. As some of you know, my brother Prabowo has been for the last 9 years president of the National Farmers Association, and as president of the National Farmers Association, he's become very well-versed and literate in all manners of agriculture, and especially agricultural problems. The fact is that Indonesia is an importer of almost all agricultural items, and this is a cause for great concern. The problem is that the current government devotes very little resources in terms of the budget towards agriculture. According to the latest budget, 2014, the government has only allocated less than 1% of its budget for agriculture, for a sector which provides a livelihood for up to 60% of our population. 1% of our budget, national budget, is being allocated for a sector which provides livelihood for up to 60% of our population. Just think about it. And think about the gross injustice that the farmers feel. The third is healthcare. Healthcare, including the introduction of the family planning system. I have with me today a headline of the Jakarta Post. Jakarta Post, dated the 11th of July, that's last week, 5 days ago, 6 days ago. And the headline is, "A stunted and overweight generation." And what does it say here? And this is something that I've known for a long time, but now the World Bank has come out. 36% of all Indonesian children below the age of 5 suffer from severe malnutrition. 36%. And because of severe malnutrition, the World Bank fears the stunted growth will affect the productivity of a future Indonesian workforce. 36%. 28% of Indonesian children under the age of 5 living in Jakarta, in DKI, 28% of what we call balita, 5-year-olds and below, suffer from malnutrition. 28% of Jakarta children under the age of 5. 56% of the children of NTT, which is Timor, Flores, Sumba, 56% of children under the age of 5 living in NTT suffer from malnutrition. And the list goes on and on. This is, in our opinion, scandalous for a country with huge resources. And this has portends ill, ladies and gentlemen, this portends ill for the future of Indonesia. If you're talking about a vibrant, young population, if 56% of the young population of Indonesia in the future are stunted growth and malnourished in their toddler years, in their infancy, it has great implications for their productivity. And it's in their World Bank study, which was announced and disclosed in this and was disseminated last week. This is an area of concern for Belinda. We have a detailed program. We intend to build a hospital in every one of the 502 municipalities and counties. We think it's doable, the funds are there. I will tell you in a few minutes where the funds will come from. Education. For any businessman, foreign expatriate businessman, who's ever received lately a resume, a job application, I think you know what I mean. I've received hundreds of applications from graduates of Indonesian universities and schools, and I can tell you that the level and quality of their resumes, the level and quality of their job applications in the Indonesian language, if not the English language, is much to be desired. It's appalling, frankly. It's appalling and shameful that I would say 95% of the job applications that I get don't meet the standard that was the standard maybe 20 or 30 years ago. And I think it shows ill, and I want to cite a case of a study of 40 national educations around the world, 40 done by the Pearson Group of the UK. Indonesia was ranked at number 40. Of 40 countries rated by the Pearson Group, Indonesia's national education system was rated at number 40. Finland was rated number 1. The United States was rated number 17. South Korea was rated number 2. Singapore was rated number 5, Japan rated number 3, and Taiwan was rated number 4. Indonesia was rated number 40 out of 40. I was not surprised, and neither were many of my friends. Fifth, environmental protection and rehabilitation. We intend, immediately when we get power, is to immediately reforest Indonesia, but in a biodiverse way. I know some of you are alarmed, thinking of maybe palm oil, right? Monoculture, I agree, very, very bad. We have a way, and we have a method to reforest Indonesia in a biodiverse way, based on a miracle tree called the palm sugar tree. And the Latin scientific name is Arenga pinnata. I would urge some of you who are interested to go on Google and look up Arenga pinnata. It's a palm sugar tree which is native to Southeast Asia. People have studied this for 25 years. This tree will produce a bioethanol, a juice, a sugary juice, which through a process can produce a bioethanol, which can provide the fuel for transportation, for cars, for planes, for ships, and for power stations, and will be sustainable and forever. All we need is the sunshine and rainfall, and that's why I mentioned the abundant rainfall. Countries without rainfall, sufficient rainfall, will have a problem with this tree. However, Indonesia is blessed with abundant rainfall, and this is a means by which we will reforest Indonesia. The target will be 10 million hectares in the first 5 to 10 years, eventually to reforest all of Indonesia's 58 million hectares of degraded land. Each hectare will be planted with up to 1,100 species of trees and plants, and will produce 20 tons, minimum 20 tons of ethanol per hectare per year. So you can imagine if we were to eventually reforest Indonesia with 40 to 50 million hectares of biodiverse forest based on the palm sugar tree, we will be able to produce at a minimum 800 million tons of ethanol per year minimum. Studies have been done. Last studies were done by the Netherlands government. The Netherlands government, the Ministry of Economic Affairs, did a validation study which proved the concept. And we will, as we get into power, immediately implement this program. This program, this tree, is well known to the Indonesian government. In fact, the current government approved this tree to be planted all over Indonesia. That was 6 years ago. Gerindra will implement that program. One of the major problems we face, ladies and gentlemen, in spite of the abundant rainfall that I mentioned, is the fact that our water resources are disappearing. Scientists have told me that in Sumatra and Java, because of the deforestation and the denuding of all the forest cover on mountains, the number of water sources, aquifers, groundwater sources, have disappeared by 80%. 5 minutes left. 80%. Highly disturbing. We will implement policies to restore water resources all over Indonesia. The sixth area of concern, the sixth area where it's a priority for us is the combating of corruption. Need I say more? When I have time at Q&A, I'll tell you how we're going to do it. Big problem. 7 is the eradication of human trafficking and illicit narcotics. We came to the shocking reality that human trafficking is a major part of criminal activity in Indonesia. I found this out from my daughter 2 years ago. It's a major problem, unrecognized. The only problem is that the National Police Force, which wants to do its best to combat human trafficking, which afflicts the lives of hundreds of thousands of children. My daughter rescued a 12-year-old girl last year from a brothel. This girl had been committed to the brothel by her aunt. She was an orphan. She was an orphan girl. She was 8 years old when she was sent to the brothel. The police rescued her at the age of 12 after 4 years enslaved in a brothel. And I'm very proud of the fact that my daughter is running for parliament next year, primarily because she wants to get rid of human trafficking. And she wants to restore a normal life for all the 12-year-old and 8-year-old and 10-year-old girls who are still in brothels in Indonesia today. It's a major problem which I did not recognize, which Prabowo didn't even know about, I didn't recognize, none of us. That is part of our program. There are only 5 police officers assigned to fight human trafficking in the whole of Indonesia today. 5. Not because the police don't want to fight it, because they don't have the money for it. We will enable the police force to have the resources, the money, the equipment to be able to fight human trafficking all over Indonesia. Illicit narcotics is a major problem. There are 5 million Indonesians who are drug addicts today. 5 million. I'm very proud of the fact that I'm also president of the Indonesian Chess Federation. David, you didn't mention that. But the Indonesian Chess Federation is now supporting our DEA, our Drug Enforcement Agency, BNN. We are providing chess masters and chess trainers to help rehabilitate drug addicts. The theory is that you get these people away from one addiction and you get them to another addiction. A more wholesome addiction. Chess. The only thing that they care about is coffee and some cigarettes. You can get 5 o'clock in the morning. Well, finally, the 2 other areas of focus for us is the empowerment of women. The Green Party promises, this is a commitment, to the women of Indonesia, we will have a minimum of 30% of women at cabinet and cabinet level posts. And this is a result of lobbying by the women of the Gerindra Party, by the way. The Gerindra Party is very vulnerable, very active, very bossy, very proactive, and we're all afraid of them. All the men are afraid of the Gerindra women. So we've agreed to have a minimum of 30% of cabinet and cabinet level posts reserved for women. Lastly, but not least, but we have so many other programs, is the protection of religious freedoms and other human rights. That is our last position, last focus, but not least. They're all of equal priority, of equal importance for the Gerindra Party. Now, how are we going to do this? And you're always asking, it's going to cost a lot of money, how are we going to do this? Indonesia, contrary to opinion, is actually a very rich country. I didn't realize how rich Indonesia is until I looked at the data. You know, I've always been told by people, we don't have money for this, we don't have money for that. We're a poor country, we don't have money for anything. We don't have money for rhino protection, we don't have money for tiger protection, we don't have any money for wildlife protection, we don't have money for libraries, we don't have money for anything. Well, the truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, that Indonesia has a lot of money. Indonesia is a very rich country. We actually don't need any foreign aid. We really don't, in terms of money. The fact is that Indonesia and Pakistan, and I'm sorry if any Pakistanis here, Indonesia and Pakistan share the dubious distinction of being the two countries with the lowest tax collection rate in the world. It's a fact. Indonesia and Pakistan have the dubious distinction of being the two countries with the lowest tax collection rates in the world. Pakistan is more or less 10% of GDP. Indonesia's target for this year was 11.7%. The Director General of Tax just announced a few weeks ago that he cannot make the target of 11.7%. Ladies and gentlemen, our neighbor and ASEAN ally, Thailand, 3 years ago reached a target of 16.7% of GDP. And according to the same study by the World Bank, Zambia in Africa reached a level of 16% of GDP. So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to do all the sums. The basic arithmetic. If we were to reach from 11.7% to 16.7%, which in my opinion is doable, is to be done by the Thais. The Thais are our Southeast Asian brethren, they're members of ASEAN. We can get technical assistance from the Thais, I'm sure. We can get technical assistance from the Zambian government, I'm sure. With Zambian technical assistance, we can reach 60%. With Thai government assistance, we should be able to get 16.7%. Now, what does it mean, ladies and gentlemen? The numbers are staggering. With a GDP of $900 million, I was told, which is supposed to be this year, you can just basically, if we were to reach the Thai level of tax collection, it would mean that we would collect 5% of GDP in tax a year, right? Which means $45 billion of tax revenue a year. The money is there in Indonesian society, it has to be collected. The fact is that only 10% of Indonesians pay tax. There are 40 million households in Indonesia. According to the government, 40 million households, 245 million Indonesians divided by an average of 6 per household, 40 million households. Now, if you accept the premise that 50% of Indonesians are poor and therefore need not pay tax, and I accept that premise, then the other side of the coin is evident that 50% of Indonesians should pay tax. That means that 20 million of households should be paying tax. And the fact is that at the moment, only 4 million tax numbers exist. The tax number, NPWP, nomor pokok wajib pajak, as all Indonesians here in the room know, is the number on your tax card which every Indonesian should have. Unfortunately, only 4 million households carry the NPWP, which means that 60 million Indonesian households don't pay tax. 60 million households which should be paying tax are not paying tax. That, in the opinion of my friends, the opinion of Gerindra, and the opinion of many tax experts, is where we'll get the 5%. Without raising the tax rate. The tax rate is very fair, in my opinion, 30% for individuals, 25% for the corporate income tax rate. One of the good things that the current government has done is to lower the tax rates. You know, I'm a capitalist, I like those tax rates. And without raising tax rates, but with getting more of the Indonesian public to be the tax net, we will be able to find another 5%. Now, 5% of GDP over a five-year presidency adds up to $225 billion. $225 billion of tax revenue to be collected. That's the aim, and that's the aim of Gerindra, and that's the aim of President Prabowo. We will get extra revenue through a fair, equitable sharing of the pie. $45 billion of taxes to be collected from people who don't pay tax at the moment, without raising tax rates. So those Republicans who are here, don't feel alarmed. We will not raise the tax rate. Russell, Freeport. We may have to negotiate other things. Tax rates are fine. I mean, take Freeport paid $2.5 billion in tax last year. Good for Freeport. Russell.
Good for Indonesia.
Good for Indonesia too. And lastly, David, I know you're getting nervous. We will undertake, as part of Gerindra's, we call the big push. Prabowo likes to call it the big push. So the big push will be a tax collection. We're going to hire a lot of tax inspectors, and we're going to go and collect the taxes which should be paid fairly, fair taxes by all Indonesians. Okay. The second part of the big push is massive investments in infrastructure. I talked about that earlier. Reforestation, biofuels, and food production. That will be the second part of the big push. And then there are other secondary areas as equally important. You know, the Republicans, if you have too many priorities, everything becomes a priority, nothing is done. So we have to be selective. Prabowo told me and our friends that basically the well-being of Indonesia rests in the hands of one department. One department holds the key to Indonesia's success as a country or failure as a country, and that's the tax department. The tax department holds the key to Indonesia's future. I agree with him. We've got to revitalize our tax department, we've got to get those taxes. And frankly, ladies and gentlemen, with $45 billion of tax revenue a year, over 5 years, we won't need any foreign aid. We will be able to give aid to other less fortunate countries. Anyway, that's the dream that we have at Gerindra. Lastly, reforestation, I mentioned that. We're going to have a massive program of reforestation of palm sugar, cassava, and there's a whole multitude of other crops which can produce biofuels. Food production, creation of food estates will be a major priority. We hope to plant 10 million hectares in the beginning, initial stage of a Prabowo presidency, based on the palm sugar reforestation model, and 6 million hectares of rice and other food crops, which we think and we understand from food experts, agronomists and so forth, is highly doable and highly feasible. And we hope to be able to produce jobs, between 1 to 4 jobs per hectare of bioethanol and of rice. Now I think the last minute, I'd like to just quote from my brother Prabowo, the leader of our party, and I quote him verbatim. I was brought up with the motto, who dares wins. Siapa berani menang in Indonesia. I think this is a time for Indonesia to dare to do what many others consider impossible. To achieve the dreams of our founding fathers in 1945, an Indonesia that is just and prosperous. A republic that can protect all its citizens, regardless of race, religion, ethnic, or social background. A republic that is respected because of the welfare and happiness of its people and its contribution to peace and harmony amongst its neighbors. Thank you very much.
I know this is a matter of concern among potential investors and current investors. Indonesia, Gerindra is and will be a pro-investment party. Remember, I'm a capitalist, Murray, and there are a great number of capitalists in the Gerindra party. We are not a socialist party, but we do feel that FDI should have a high degree of reciprocity. And what do I mean by this? There's a lot of unhappiness among Indonesians, including Gerindra, that free trade has not been there has not been enough or sufficient reciprocity in free trade, especially in services. One particular concern is banking and insurance. If and when you go to Indonesia, you will see foreign banks everywhere. Everywhere. I was in Kediri 2 weeks ago, in the town of Kediri in East Java. I was proud of the fact, but also concerned that I saw the foreign bank branches all over Kediri. HSBC, ANZ Bank, Maybank, OCBC, UOB, in the town of Kediri. Now, there's a bank, Murray, there's a bank called CIMB Niaga, which is a Malaysian bank, with 2,000 branches in Indonesia, with no restrictions as to whether to get rupiah or dollar deposits. The problem is that Indonesian banks, Bank Mandiri and BNI, don't have the same privileges in Malaysia, where we have 3 million legal and illegal immigrants, or illegal and legal workers. I don't know, Pak Dino, I don't know what the latest figure is. Last count, I was told there were 3 million. 3 million Indonesians living in Malaysia deserve to have the right access to Indonesian banks, the way that Malaysians have in Indonesia. So that's one, and by the way, CIMB Bank is one of many, many banks with the same privileges. The problem is we don't have the same access, the same level of reciprocity in Malaysia. We don't have it in Singapore, and we don't have it in China. Bank of China, ICBC, the two of the biggest banks in China, have branches in Indonesia. They have open access. Our banks are restricted to Shanghai. They're limited to dollar deposits. They cannot go into yuan or renminbi business. Completely restricted by the People's Bank of China. So this is the sort of thing where we have rising resentment, frankly. I resent it. I'm also resentful of that. But it's more in terms of in the services sector. Now, on extractive industries like Freeport, Gerindra is committed to do its maximum processing of commodities within Indonesia. Russell, take note. Gerindra is determined and will implement policies to have maximum value added in Indonesia. Now, does it make us nationalistic, patriotic? I think it's reasonable. There's no reason why our extractive industries could not build more of its value added in Indonesia. Now, the problem is, and I realize this, Russell, and a lot of my friends are in the mining industry, The problem is that implementation of this value added currently undertaken has not been realistic. You know, manganese producers in Timor complained to me that they would like to have value added, but there's no electricity in Timor, or Sumbawa, or Flores. So what should happen is that the government or government incentivized private businesses should be given the privilege and the right and access to build the infrastructure that I mentioned earlier. So one of the problems, and we are cognizant of the complaints by the private sector and by the mining industry, there's not enough infrastructure, there's not enough power, there are not enough adequate port facilities, there's not enough of the handling facilities. All those things are correct. We recognize that. That is just a major problem which has to be corrected, but that will be done by a Gerinda government. Okay, Murray, I think the second thing was, I forgot. I mean, I'm sorry, you mentioned the second thing.
Relations with the U.S.
Relations with the U.S. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, you know, Prabowo graduated. I think he's the only candidate. I don't know, maybe Gita. Did Gita graduate from an American school? Yeah? Okay, so Gita, who I understand is going to run for president, and Prabowo is the other candidate who graduated from American school. So what does it mean? It means that Prabowo is very pro-American. He's been to American high school. He went to American grade school. I mean, you know, he's been going to American school all his life. He went to Special Forces. He was in Fort Benning, Fort Bragg. You know, I'm pro-American. Until recently, I was an investor in California in a big way, in the oil business. Yes, the U.S. will be a privileged partner with the Gerinda administration.
Yeah, a young lady, please.
Thank you for your talk today. My name is Jillian Morris. I'm with Management Systems International. And I was very intrigued about your party's position on sugar palms and biofuels. But you also have spoken both in your prepared remarks and in your answer to the last question about issues with infrastructure, ports, roads, airports. And so I was wondering how Gerinda was planning to make sure that the infrastructure first to process these biofuels that could be produced from the palm sugar trees are in place, and how you'll be able to move them effectively throughout all of the islands of Indonesia so that they can benefit the country's people. So if you could speak a little on that.
Okay, so the palm sugar reforestation model, which is a model which has been examined and tested by various international governments, in the latest one being the Netherlands. And the key is basically to have access to degraded lands all over Indonesia. We will reforest degraded lands. The emphasis will be on private-public partnerships. We would want to invite foreign companies to come in. In fact, we feel there's a role for companies like Exxon, BP, ConocoPhillips, oil companies, which are in essence energy companies, to come in and replant Indonesia and keep being in the energy business. The difference being, you know, one based on fossil fuels to another based on a sustainable energy source. So infrastructure is going to be very important. We will have to do ethanol plants. We will have to, but the planting, the big emphasis will be on the planting. It'll take about 6 years for a palm sugar plant to reach gestation period. The plant will live until the age of 12 to 14 years old, and then the plant will regenerate by itself naturally. So it's a two-day thing. I mean, I can get Dr. Willie Smith to explain to you, but it's very, very exciting. The Tanzanian government, Tanzania in East Africa has a big problem with deforestation. They don't have their own native sources of oil and gas. Therefore, the people, for cooking, they have to cut down the forests. And there's a huge problem of desertification in Tanzania. The Tanzanian Minister of Environment was a woman. I think she's still Minister of the Environment. She came to visit us a few years ago. She went to Manado. She took a look. She's very, very impressed. She wants to do, and she's persuaded the Prime Minister of Tanzania to adopt this thing. So we actually can help countries in Africa and others. One idea is to, in fact, do this in Haiti. Now, some of you who know Haiti, I don't know Haiti myself, but I've heard from people, I've seen pictures and documentaries. Haiti is a country completely denuded of forest. There's no forest left. It's all basically desert. And it's a great cause of flooding and other calamities. Haiti is one possible candidate to do this. So this is something exciting, I think. The African countries are interested. Obviously, we want to do it in Indonesia, and we think we can export it too. We have a partner called the Brenningmeier family, a very prominent Dutch family, one of the wealthiest families in Europe, who are actually partnering with us to do something, and they want to do this in other parts of the world. So it's very exciting. Thank you.
Sean Levine, the Indonesian analyst from Marriage Group. It's good to see you again. Very interesting and bold plan at Grinja that you presented to us today, but that's going to require a very bold and decisive seventh president of Indonesia. And in order for someone like Pak Prabowo to actually be elected, he's going to have to be nominated first. So really the question I have is maybe not as exciting, but what do you think is a possibility that in October, Parliament's going to take up the discord or the discussion again about revising the presidential election law or the election law and trying to revise down this 20% threshold? And if the parties, particularly the big three, PDIP, Golkar, and Partai Demokrat, don't agree, what parties do you think that Grinja will consider partnering with after the election in April, parliamentary elections? Thank you.
Well, actually, Sean, we are realists. We are assuming that the law will not be revised. We are assuming that the 20% threshold will be maintained. But we're not pessimistic. I mean, the latest polls show that we're actually one of the top three. I mean, I've seen 2, 3, 4 different polls.
Explain the 20% threshold.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, apparently for those who don't know and don't follow the Indonesian electoral law, and most of you and most of us don't follow, there is a threshold of 20% with which to nominate, by which a presidential nominee can be nominated for president. So 20% of the seats in parliament, which means essentially getting 112 seats or more, or 25% of the popular vote. So if somebody can muster at 25% of the popular vote, one can be nominated or else be nominated by a combination of parties or one party with more than 20% of the seats in parliament, which means 112. But we're optimistic. I mean, our late numbers, and these are numbers which are done by reputable polling firms, show us at between 18 and 22, 23%. I think the lowest was 15%. And so we're optimistic. We're optimistic. Now, which parties I mean, I have to tell you, I can't mention names, but there are some people who you read in the papers who are talking to us actively in trying to be our partner or partners. But I'm not liberty to tell you. Okay? Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Chip Barber.
I'm Chip Barber of the State Department. I'm the forest chief there. Our office also, my colleague Alan Shaw is here. I think that with you on Sunday wearing your rhino conservation hat. So we're also the office working on that. My question is about agriculture, forests, and land tenure in the degraded lands. As you well know, we talk a lot about extending agriculture, reforesting, and things like that. In all the degraded lands areas, so of course there are these lots of conflicts and overlaps. Those kinds of concessions, the state's role there, local communities have lived there a long time, and a lot of investors and others have said this is, how do we get past that problem? Because long-term investment requires some sort of clarity. I'd be interested in your views on that. Thanks.
Very good point. In fact, I'm glad to tell you that I was instrumental in changing the law, Chip. And this is on the law governing forest concessions, HPH. As some of you know, HPH, forest concessions. Most of the 58 million hectares of degraded forest is actually on forest concessions. Now, until recently, until 2-3 years ago, concessions had to be reforested based on a certain model of reforestation, which basically was monoculture. I mean, if you wanted Meranti, and we got the law changed. We got the Minister of Forestry, Zulkifli Hasan, to change the law, which is a ministerial decree, which allows for what is called silviculture. So in fact, we are now allowed, and I'm about to embark this year on reforesting my concession. I have 173,000 of hectares, of which about 120,000 hectares is degraded because there were 2 fires. You recall in 1983, there was a big fire, and in 1997, there was a big fire. These 2 fires destroyed a lot of Indonesian forests. So the law has changed. We are now able legally to replant using a silvicultural model of reforestation, which means what? Which means, in our case, we will reforest between 60 to 150 species of trees, in some areas up to 1,100 species of trees. And the whole idea is not only to do timber, but also to plant these sugar-secreting trees, the palm sugar tree, but also to be able to plant fruit trees. Now, why is fruit trees important? Fruit trees sustain wildlife. Now you can understand why I got involved, because I actually helped draw the regulation. So wildlife will be able to be sustained by fruit trees, and fruit trees will be able now to plant together with all the timber trees and others. So we will have cassava, palm sugar, timber, Meranti, agatis, and all the others, up to 150 species, in some cases 1,100 species of trees. So we think that we will be able to restore the habitat for the wildlife of Indonesia, which, as you know, some of the species are in danger of extinction.
Next question, please.
My name is Sonia. Thank you so much for listening. So I'm really interested that you were speaking earlier about, you mentioned about religion radicalism in Indonesia, that you faced that. So in 2010, I have a book, Ilusi Negara Islam, if you hear that. And then we launched here English version, The Illusion of Islamic State. We have 27 researchers from all of the states in Indonesia, or governor in Indonesia, and then all this report is that religion radicalism is increased very significant rapidly. So my question is that how make the people, our folk or our government aware about the issue? The radicalism, the religion radicalism exists, very real. And then the second question is how we again face the radicalism in Indonesia. Because this is I think this is a really real, major problem in our country. Thank you. By the way, I'm Sonia from Global Peace Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Sonia. You're absolutely right. But you know, the key is political will, Ibu Sonia. The key is kemauan politik. There must be a political will by the government to stand up to these movements. I mean, you know, it's all very well to have to talk, but one has to have action, and that's one of the problems. There's a a great awareness among the Indonesian public of this problem. But it needs political will and needs a reaction from the powers that be. Now, I just give you an example. At the Ministry of Agriculture, which is controlled by the PKS, Pak Dino, yeah? 73, in the last 9 years, 73 Christian government officials have been fired from the Ministry of Agriculture, and none have been replaced. In fact, at this very moment, there are no Christian government officials in the Ministry of Agriculture. That tells you something, doesn't it? It must tell you something. That if this is allowed to continue, you know, unrestricted, you can understand what I mean. You know, in one ministry alone, 73 Christian government officials have been relieved of their posts in 9 years. None have been replaced. Not a single Christian government official is in a post in the Ministry of Agriculture. That's what I mean by political will. The government of Indonesia must stop this discrimination.
Jerry.
Thank you. Thank you, Hashim. Jerry Hyman at the Center for Strategic International Studies. You mentioned one of your 9 priorities, thank you for the details, was corruption and, I would imagine, better governance. I wondered if you could, you were pretty explicit about all of the other 8 priorities, but not so explicit about that one. And connected to your notion of political will, I wonder if you could be a little more explicit about what you would do about the bloated bureaucracy, about corruption, about the connection with, some people say, I'm sure you would disagree, big business. And I wonder if you could help us understand the specifics of readers tell us?
What we will do, we have a specific plan on what to do. We will immediately extend prison sentences for violators. One of the things which gets me very, very angry is when I see corrupt officials getting 1 year prison term, 2 years prison term, 3 years prison term, and then you find them out of the prison for good behavior. For good behavior. There's one legislator by the name of Angelina Sondak. She was a celebrity film star, beautiful woman, corrupt woman. She was convicted to 2.5 to 3 years in prison for embezzling $4 million US, 36 billion. So at the time it was 9,000 rupees, but between 3.6 to $4 million. She was convicted of embezzlement, fraud, corruption. She was sentenced to 2.5 or 2 years in prison, 3 years. She was detained for a year before that. She'll come out soon. What got me and my friends really angry was the fact that she was fined $200,000, which meant that she's allowed to abscond and keep the other $4 million. She was convicted of fraud of $4 million. She was fined $200,000. Now, can you imagine where the $3.8 million is? That got me really angry. That's the problem with our judicial system. The judicial system is too lenient. It's just too lenient. And it's by coincidence that often the jail sentences, are parallel to the amount of time that they spent in prison waiting for trial. So if a person is in trial for 1 year, then they get sentenced for 1.5 years within, and then 6 months for good behavior, and they're out again, I've been in quite numerous wedding receptions. I see people who I thought were in prison, and they were waiting in line with me. They were waiting in line with me. I said, my God, I said, I was talking to my, I said, I thought he was in prison. No. And he saw me, hey, Pa Hashim, how are you? I'm damn angry, that's what I am, I saw that 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago. I don't have to mention who's the name, Pa Dino. But I got so angry. I said, and he looked at me and he's smiling, he was put in prison for embezzling $2.3 million. 23 billion rupees. And need I say more? Okay, so what I'm saying is we're going to be very tough on jail sentences, extremely tough on jail sentences. We're talking about 10 to 15 years minimum prison times. That's one way to. I don't really believe, when people are talking about the death penalty. I'm on my conscience doesn't. Too many innocent people have been sent to their deaths in numerous countries. I don't believe in. For me, I'm a God-fearing person. It's the Almighty who will decide, and send. So I don't believe in the death penalty, but I believe in severe discomfort. Somebody proposed that one of my next part of my program as chairman of the Jakarta Zoo is to provide facilities for corrupt officials, and that's quite appealing actually. I maybe actually put it there. But okay, the second thing is this. The second is we have to be cognizant the fact that many of the judges and policemen and the prosecutors are very, very poorly paid. I think a judge is paid 6 million rupees a month, yeah? A regular judge is paid $600 a month. $600 a month. This is human nature, and there's a lot of temptation, and it's not for me to judge. But I think that we have to increase salaries for law enforcement officials. And then there are other things that we can do as well.
We've exceeded our time. If anyone has to leave, they can leave quietly. That's fine. These will be the last 3 questions. Please, Jessica.
Hi, my name is Jessica Darnella from the World Resources Institute. Thank you so much for your very energizing talk. You mentioned in your talk about the quality of resumes of Indonesian graduates. I was fortunate enough to study University of the United States, and my interactions with my fellow graduates from those a graduate from abroad is that they often seek employment elsewhere in other countries, and we seem to find there is a lack of incentive to seek employment back home in Indonesia. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on this, and how would you address this issue? Thank you.
I think one of the things we have to do is reintroduce foreign language education in the Indonesian curriculum. The state of English education in Indonesian schools is appalling. And we have to, I think, give special allocation of funds for foreign language, whether it's English. My inclination is to introduce English and Mandarin Chinese language education into our schools, but primarily English, and then of course Japanese and others, and maybe Arabic as secondary. But the state of our language education is appalling, And then one other thing which I'd like to cite. There was some articles about the state of our Indonesian education. I mentioned to you about the Pearson study. But there's another study called the PISA study, which measures the educational aptitude of students around the world, 8th grade students around the world, and they measure between levels 1 to 5, 1 to 6. Unfortunately, most Indonesians fail to attain level 2. Most Indonesian 8th graders only reach level 1. Level 1. Unlike many, in fact, our educational system is rated the worst in terms of 8th grade education, and I have the study to show it to you here. But we have to do many things in the educational system. I mean, and one of them is to improve teacher salaries. Teacher salaries are in most places very bad. In Jakarta, in the city of Jakarta, in DKI, in fact, teacher salaries are quite good. I have to admit that teacher salaries are quite good, and were good even under the previous governor. So that is, but we have 34 provinces now in Indonesia, and most provinces have very bad educational systems. So yeah, if I could, we are rated the lowest next to the Philippines. The lowest aptitude among student performance among all East Asian countries other than the Philippines. We are ranked 36 out of 59 countries surveyed, and PISA ranks Indonesia 50th out of 57 countries in science and education. So it's not a good state of affairs.
Please.
Thank you for your talk today. My name is Yuan from the Brookings Institution. Can you elaborate on how Get Indra will tackle human rights issues? And can you also tell me if Prabowo and Get Indra will rectify past human rights abuses, especially stemming from the May 1998 riots?
Okay, thank you for that question. I was anticipating that, by the way. I'd like to say that if there is any rectification, it should not be selective. So, I mean, my only response is that Prabowo would like to be treated fairly, especially by the media, and it should not be selective. So, it's not only one person who's in the spotlight. There were a lot of others who were not on the spotlight. So this is something that I think all of you to be aware. My brother was a 2-star general, where there were a lot of 3-star, 4-star, and there were 5-star generals also in 1998. And all I can say is, one can say one man's kidnapping is another man's rendition, So not to be selective, it has to be fair. I think Prabowo has had a very bad press. He's much maligned. He has his weak spots. One of his weak spots is a hot temper. That I know for the last 59 years of my life, being the target of his temper for most of his life. But no, and what will Gerindra do to rectify that? We will do what has to be done. And the government of Indonesia, the past 3 governments of Indonesia have had the opportunity to rectify anything. If there needs to be some rectification. What will we do in the future? We will promote, as I said, as my 9th point, promote active protection of human rights. It's not only civil rights or political rights. The freedom of worship is a fundamental human right, sir. And as that lady Ibu Sonia just mentioned, it's a sentiment the sentiment of alarm, of anxiety, of fear among Indonesian religious minorities, including moderate Muslims, by the way, that needs to be protected. So yes, we believe in human rights, we believe in civil rights, we believe in the freedom of worship and political rights. Human rights is not only the domain of politicians or pro-democracy activists, it's the domain of ordinary human beings who want the freedom of worship free of fear.
Last question. Mr. Goulardi, Mr. Goulardi is an Ed Masters Fellow studying under a USINDO program here in the U.S.
Thank you so much, Emerson. My name is Goulardi, and I will be studying at the University of Virginia School of Law this fall. Thank you very much, Hashim, for your presentation today. I am very much interested in trying to know the redress program in education system, sustainable Indonesian education system, bearing in mind that the last curriculum of 2013 has drawn a lot of criticism, and that Indonesian curriculum has changed a lot in the past years that confuses the students and also the teachers. And I would also like to know whether that the current Indonesian education system it emphasizes only on what and but not on how. So what is being appreciated is only the result of the process. It can be seen from the national examination or other examination that is using the multiple choices instead of essays. That is different to, for example, like a system in the IGCSE, United Kingdom. And I would like to know your view, the Gerindra view on this matter. Thank you very much.
We at Gerindra have studied the experience of other developing countries. One of them, which I much admire, is the Republic of Korea, South Korea. There's a reason why Korea has produced Samsung, LG, Kia, and countless other Lotte. There's a reason, and the reason is, in my opinion, and opinion of Prabowo and many of the leaders of Gerindra, is because of the outstanding education system, which was just borne out by the Pearson study, which I mentioned earlier, the second best educational system in the world. Now, in 1960, I think the World Bank did a ranking of countries. In 1960, Indonesia, Ghana, and Nigeria ranked above Korea in the level of economic development, if I'm not incorrect. We ranked above, Nigeria, Ghana, Indonesia ranked above the Republic of Korea. And now we see, which company competes with Apple around the world. It's not Toshiba, it's not Philips, it's not Fujitsu, it's not Panasonic, it is Samsung Electronics. There's a reason for that, okay? And that's because of the educational system, in my opinion, and opinion of many other people. Now, there are many, many things that Gerindra will do from day two of being in power, from day two. One is, and this is something which I think is shocking to many of you, who don't know that textbooks in Indonesia are some of the most expensive, if not the most expensive in the world. Ya, Pak Goulardi. Textbooks in Indonesia are very, very expensive. And you know the reason for that? The reason is because textbooks are considered a luxury item, barang mewah. In the nomenclature of our customs department, textbooks are considered on par with my Mercedes-Benz. My Mercedes-Benz. I have an S-Class Mercedes-Benz. I pay the same tax for textbooks that I pay for my car. Now, on day two of coming to power, our Minister of Education will abolish all import duties on textbooks coming into Indonesia. It's a simple act. The Minister of Finance, which controls both the Director General of Taxation and the Director General of Customs, can instruct both departments under him or her to reduce the import duty from, I think, 200%, I think it is, or 100%, to zero. That will immediately reduce the cost of education in Indonesia today. It will immediately, I guarantee you, Pak Goulardi, it will immediately reduce the cost of education. The second thing we'll do is we're going to forbid the publication the printing of textbooks for at least 5 years. There is a racket going on. It's a racket. It's a scam where Indonesian school children in both state and private schools have to buy textbooks, Indonesian language, arithmetic, all the basic textbooks have to be bought every school year. Often every semester, they have to buy new textbooks. The Indonesian language hasn't changed very much in the last 25 years, as far as I know. There's no need to do new textbooks every year. In fact, we don't need a textbook. When I was a student, when I was a pupil, I went to English schools, I used textbooks which were inherited from the previous class. And the previous class before that. In fact, when these textbooks were there for 10, 15 years. The English language hadn't changed. The Indonesian language hasn't changed since 1970-something, when we changed the spelling system. So there's no reason why English language has to be bought. The textbook has to be bought every semester in many places and every year in all places. We as Gerindra will immediately ban, will be a presidential decree, we will ban the publication and printing of new textbooks for basic disciplines. Because it's a scam, it's a money-making fundraising scam. The printing and publication of textbooks in Indonesia today is a huge business, by the way, enormous business, but it makes it expensive for poor children to get a decent education. Textbooks, a major cost item for Indonesian children and their parents. This ought not to be, it should not be, and will not be. That's two basic items. The first week in power, we can do that. It's not a problem. Now, on the major fundamental way of education, we want to concentrate on vocational disciplines. We want to concentrate on to teach Indonesian children and eventually, high school graduates a way of making a living honestly, basically teaching skills. We want to concentrate on skills building for Indonesian students. It's all very well to produce social science students and social studies students and so forth and so forth, but oftentimes it's very difficult for social studies students and social science to get jobs. And here it's a difference from in the United States where you go to America. I went to American high school. I had a general education in American high school. Indonesians don't have that. They either go to an arts or a science-based curriculum. They get streamed into at a very early age. And this is not good. This is not good. I think we have to look at for more general studies curriculum for high schools and to make people more prepared for vocations. We have to concentrate on vocational education at a later stage, but we have to make people employable. The last point I want to make again is foreign language. But I don't think a foreign language is being taught properly, adequately in Indonesian schools. And you can see that, I can hear that from all my foreign friends when they try to hire people, they try to hire English-speaking graduates. And the problem, they complain to me, I don't know, Russell, I mean, what your experience is, but the experience of my expatriate friends is that a lot of Indonesian graduates don't speak proper English. And this is something that ought to be addressed, and we have to allocate a lot of resources, one idea, frankly, is to ask, graduates of American and Australian and New Zealand and other English-speaking countries to send their graduates, many of whom are unemployed, to come to Indonesia while waiting for further employment in their home countries to be able to teach us and teach our students Indonesian. That's actually an idea which is being floated around. Okay.
Thank you. Let's all thank Pak Hashim for informing us so nicely.